So you are John Bolos, the head of the John Bolos.
That's right.
Head of the John Bolos team here at SouthPark.
Yep.
Here's the thing. You are a huge team. In the last 12 months, you have already done $24.6 million in sales.
Yeah.
You run a team of 30. So you have probably 30 plus now, right?
Like 35, 36, something like that, yeah.
And growing.
And growing. We have a goal to be 50 by the end of June.
That's a huge goal.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But a team doing large amounts of volume and 30 people, that's not where you got started.
No. No.
You didn't just jump right in and you were like, let's take on a team of 30.
No,
right?
In fact, at one point I didn't know if I was going to go solo or have a team at one point of the career. So it's interesting to know that 22 years later, I'm still running the team. That's a good thing. Just saying.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
So take us back. 22 years you started?
2003.
2003.
Showing my age now.
That's okay.
I used to be the young guy in real estate, like how these guys are that are on the team, like the 23-year-old kid. Back in 2003, people were still like, I still had older real estate agents delivering contracts to me like typed in 2003. Not everyone was doing it, but there were some old school agents that were still typing and doing. I would get like a printout contract in Columbia, South Carolina. There's some interesting stuff when I started. Real estate, I always thought was really behind on technology until like the last maybe 10 years or so. There was like a boom all of a sudden in the industry. I think we were late to the game as a whole. So.
All right, I want to dive into that more.
I
want to dive into that more, but let's start with where you came from. You mentioned Columbia.
I did. So I moved to Columbia, and I got into real estate in 2003 because my mom was in real estate. She worked for, ironically, her first brokerage she joined was Century 21. And I'll tell you guys why that's ironic in a minute. But so she joined there, and I never officially was with Century 21. I worked with her as an assistant for like 6 months, and then she left and went out and started her own brokerage. She parted ways with them over splits or whatever it was, and opened up her own brokerage called Covenant Properties. And I was the lead transaction coordinator / agent that dealt with everything once it went active in MLS. So as soon as the property came in, went active, I took over. And we were doing large. This is where I got like doing volume, and we were handling. We were like an asset management company for these banks. We worked with all the major banks: HSBC, Bank of America, the VA. And we were getting. I think we did like at our peak 400 or 500 listings a year that we were doing, and it was only 4 of us running it. So right in the beginning, I was thrown into that mix of doing that, and it was so much foreclosure and REO that I, became really good with dealing with trouble. You know what I mean? Because every one of these properties has a problem. There's someone didn't move out, someone burnt the house down one time, right? So I had all of these experiences at such a young age in real estate that most people don't do in their entire career in real estate. So by the time 2008 rolled around, I was I'd already done like 1,500 transactions, and I was 28 years old, and then they dried up. And my mom retired, and she gave me the business for the last year. About like, I don't know why you guys think that there was like a hand-me-down to it, because she gave me the business. There was nothing. The market crashed, subprime market. All the foreclosures had a moratorium on it. So we literally in 1 year went from doing 400 transactions to like less than 100 within a 1 year period. The business was like a stock plummeting. It just went down. So then there just became this question of like, what do I do with my life? What do I do with my career? Am I still going to pursue this? I was so burnt out on the foreclosure thing because like you don't leave your desk. You're just there all day getting yelled at by banks and hitting quotas and data. And I've got a runner doing everything. It was just, it's real estate, but it's not like traditional real estate that most people think it is, So, I started looking into like online advertising, and ultimately, after several trial and errors of companies that don't even exist anymore today, I landed on Zillow. Somebody recommended to me to get with Zillow. So in 2010, I was one of the pioneers of one of the first premier agents on the East Coast to get in with Zillow. So that's what brings us up until now, right? So I've had this relationship with Zillow now for the last 15 years, and I think that decision in my career was the most pivotal decision that I've made, period, in my entire real estate career. That really opened doors for me. My numbers, I started doing hundreds of transactions again. I built a team. I had a stigmatism in Colombia that I was the foreclosure guy. So my name changed from the foreclosure guy to the Zillow guy is what ended up happening. I became the Zillow guy down there. And then eventually I became number one, right, doing all of that,
And that's what matters.
Yeah. I literally became the number one agent by units moved in Colombia sometime in the mid-2010s, sometime in that decade span. And, but the final kind of transformation portion of that, because people still looked at me as this 28-year-old kid. Yes, he's number one in sales. Yes, he's the foreclosure guy. And so then really seal the deal, I said, well, I need to do something with my brokerage. And so then all of a sudden, everybody was calling me. Keller Williams offered to quote unquote buy me. We won't discuss that offer. It was really okay.
That wasn't us. Colombia, just saying.
So but I had a lot of different buyout options, and I didn't do it. And I said, you know what? And everybody had such like an old school mentality. Still, remember, this is still like 2010, or 2000. It's like 2012 now. And technology still wasn't kicking in all the way yet with it all. Zillow was really just entering their prime. And so I said, I'm going to just buy my own brokerage. So I went hunting, and I ended up buying, ironically, Century 21, where my mom started, because that company went out of business in all of Colombia, so there was no market with it. So I bought that franchise, and I think that's what really changed the whole image of me in Colombia at that point was this foreclosure guy became the Zillow guy. Now he owns the Century 21, and I opened up 3 shops and recruited like 150 agents in like 15 months. The whole thing happened like that.
John, that's a huge explosion.
Yeah.
For anybody who's trying to build a team and attract people to their team. What do you think made you grow to that level that quickly?
People knew who I was in the industry because they, you know what it was? I did so many transactions, and Columbia's a small town, every single agent knew who I was. Even if they knew I was the foreclosure guy, they knew who I was. And then when they started seeing numbers and success go through the roof, and just different things. Like I participated, I became the vice president of the MLS for the Colombia MLS at one point. And so my name was pretty much popping up everywhere. And then buying Century 21 and bringing a fresh taste of technology and a young approach to the real estate industry in Colombia really boomed with a lot of people between 30 and 50 years old. And I think that played a huge role. And so it was really easy to recruit because people were looking for something fresh and different and out of the traditional way, and someone that was willing to work with the splits and say, yes, again, no offense, Keller Williams, I'll match the Keller Williams split at the time, because I didn't want to join Keller Williams at the time. We're going to talk about how I got over here.
Okay, good.
Because I really love this firm specifically.
I know you do.
And but I was thinking outside the box like that and acknowledging who my competitors were, and coming up with solutions on how to grow the business. Even with Century 21, I was in the top 5% in the country for that company, and I only ran that franchise for like 5-6 years, and then I came to Charlotte and said I don't want to do the franchise anymore. I wasn't from Colombia. I grew up in Syracuse, New York. My wife's from South America. We wanted something different, and we said, how about Charlotte? So we said yes. So sold the Century 21 franchise, moved to Charlotte, started from scratch. My buddy now, Trent Corbin, who a competitor, but also a very dear friend of mine, introduced me to you guys over here. And I really liked what you guys had going on at this Keller Williams. And I felt that this Keller Williams was different than not just the Columbia Keller Williams, but the Keller Williams in Charlotte. This company is different than the other ones over there. And Trent had kind of turned me on to that to say, these guys are progressive, they think outside the box, you'll like the owner. So I dove in, and I took the dive into KW, and I was extremely happy overall with just the support and everything you guys brought to the table for me that I didn't have to, as a broker owner anymore, had to really care about, or like not care about, worry about is the word, I didn't have to worry about it anymore. And, it allowed me to really focus on the team. And here I am now in Charlotte, and, this is my 5th year at Keller Williams here. And since I left Century 21, and I've already outdone what I've done pretty much in Columbia and in Charlotte when I first got here. So it's been a good ride.
We have to go back to the Trent and John story a little bit, because this story always makes me giggle just a little bit. When you two first met, really the premise of you two meeting was because you wanted Trent to join you over at Century.
He told me
21.
yes. Dude, he did. It was a 6-month courtship, essentially, to where I called him. I'm like, you don't know who I am, but I'm just moving to Charlotte. I'm thinking about bringing the Century 21 franchise up here. I want you to run it with me. Let's talk. I said, you're doing what I'm doing in Columbia. I'm like, you're the number one guy up here. I'm the number one guy down there. Yeah. Let's have a conversation. So I met him for lunch, this total stranger that I found going to Zillow.com and just saying, this is the number one guy here. Yeah. And it turned into just this, getting to kind of know each other. And then we became friends. And then we started going to conventions together, and it was just really pleasant all around. And even though that we didn't make that happen, about a year went by when he turned down the offer at the end. And then I had this, just this epiphany that I was going to, leave Century 21. And I called Trent and I said, hey, you know how I was always trying to get you to join Century 21? I'm like, what if I came to KW? And he started laughing and we went to lunch and the rest is history. So it's a funny story.
And you guys are some of the top Zillow teams now.
We are. Yeah, we are.
So let's be really honest here. Zillow gets a bad name.
Mm-hmm. And they do. They've been getting a bad name since 2010.
And you've been in it for 15 plus years now.
15 plus years with them, yeah.
Tell me why you still stick with them.
I stick with them because everything, despite what everybody thinks or hears, everything that Zillow has ever promised me or said they were wanting to deliver to me, they have come through all the way. So I want to just say that first and foremost with my relationship with the asset managers, their bosses, their bosses' bosses. They've always come through with me what I needed as a team, and they've come through and given me what I need with it. So I want to say that for number one with them. Number two, I have tried every single lead platform, everything. Homes.com, Realtor.com, Trulia when it was a thing, Zillow, Facebook, Google pay-per-click, you name it, I have done it. And the highest conversion rate I've had time over time again has just been Zillow. Mm-hmm. I always feel that like the real estate industry gets upset with Zillow, like how the taxi drivers get upset with the Uber drivers. Because you have this disruption company that comes in that has a better product mm-hmm. and can, identify a problem in the industry, and the public loves it. So why are we fighting that instead of just working with the public and embracing this is what they're using and create the relationship? Now, it's a little too late for Charlotte now because Zillow pretty much closed everybody out, here. But for pretty much most of the rest of the states, though, like for a new realtor, if I didn't have a team I was going to join, the first thing I would be doing is lead generation and investing online to have some type of lead source come to me. And and I know that Zillow is probably the most expensive, but I know overall that those are going to really be bringing the top converting numbers for a person that's getting started.
So you mentioned an agent getting started, definitely the lead generation piece. I get asked all the time, how am I going to get my first sale?
Yeah.
You've been in this for a while. You have dabbled in a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. If you were starting over today as a brand new agent, John, which we know you're not, what's the very first thing you do besides the lead gen?
No, I would join a team.
You would?
Yeah, 100%.
Tell me why.
100%. I would join a team because I would have no money. The cost of leads is so expensive now, and the market is so saturated that you've got to have some thick skin and time to incubate it. If I was this rich person getting into real estate with this huge endless surplus, and there are people like that that could do that, but even when you do that, you don't get the training that the team's going to provide with you on that. So the part of that problem essentially is that, okay, I bought all these leads, now what do I do with them? And your conversion rate's going to suck compared to working with someone who's really guiding you through that process. And I always feel that for me, and it's funny because when I started in 2003, Teams wasn't really a thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and I look back at my story and I'm like, wow, I really probably developed one of the first mega teams in Columbia. I didn't know what it was until we're in modern times now talking about it. That probably was one of the first things was I built this mega team. And I think that these teams bring so much support into the agents at the end of the day. And people complain about the splits but I have agents that make multiple six figures doing it because once they learn the formula, it's just like a fire hydrant of leads that comes in, at the end of the day. So that's what I would do. I would join a team. I'd probably, I know me, I'm very savvy in type A. I would join a team until I figured it out, and then I would probably see if I could figure it out by doing my own team, right? Because if I know this team's successful at doing this formula, what's to stop me from becoming a team person and doing that formula right at the end of the day. You know, and so it just depends on the drive of the person and how much responsibility they want to have, right? I think it could be a different story that if I came into a team and I was making $300-400K a year and I could do whatever I wanted and not run the team. That's an interesting concept too to think about, right? It's a lot of money.
Yeah, especially in real estate. When you think about it, right? Out of the, what did we have, 1.4 something million agents, 71% of them in 2024 did not do a single transaction.
Yeah, and I heard a second stat that only a certain number did under 2. Did you hear that? There's like a second stat to that. So where like out of the 29%, I think like half or something like that did less than 2.
Yes,
so,
I did hear that one. I don't know that stat as well.
So it's really only like 15%, we're just going to round about for this conversation here, are really doing the brunt of the business. It's not even the 80-20 rule, it's less than that.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's
and even more so now, like I think that you have a lot more, I think like if you had asked me 20 years ago, you know, what do you think about joining a team? I think there was enough business to be built as a personal person if you were very social and you could just do like the drip campaign and work with that. I think that worked a lot better. I'm not saying it doesn't work now because I see a lot of success with it now, but you have so many other things coming at everybody from the internet now that draw them away from your sphere and bring you online. And it doesn't have to just be Zillow. There's agent websites set up that are trained, you know, online on Google when you're searching for home with a pool. You know, you've got these, you know, 1, 2, 3 real estate that pop up that's you're really just a team page at Keller Williams or some other real estate brokerage that lured them in through a Google search, and now they're talking to an agent, you know, and they could have been talking to you the whole time through your sphere, but it's just how it happens. The internet will just lure them in. I hear it all the time. Oh, you know, I started talking, we saw this home, and we just ended up going with the guy because we really liked him. I hear that all the time. So I know the internet is a really kind of it's to be loved by like everybody, but also to just know that like there's a very good chance your business will be stolen from the internet, you know, at the end of the day. And I think lead gen kind of helps at least replace what you're losing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
you just talked a lot about the internet, and before you talked about, you know, the real estate market kind of being behind in technology. Elaborate on that a little bit more.
You know, so I guess just putting me on the spot and asking me on that, I would have to say the average realtor was 57 years old when I joined, right? And I was 23. So you can think about just the gap of that, okay? People, you know, if you talk about 2003, for example, like that, I mean, high-speed internet just became a thing like in 99 or 2000. So you had high-speed internet only for these few years, you know, like, and like, you had people in their mid-50s, and I think, and this isn't a jab, I mean, I'm 45, so I'm almost there, right? You know, but there's something to be said about a 20-something-year-old with technology, okay, and someone in their 50s, especially in a window where someone in their 50s grew up in the 70s at that point in time, whatever, right? You know, so there's a gap already right there of getting people that didn't have really computer access, not computer access, but just really good and savvy on the computer because everything was fresh up and coming. You know, and then with technology, it just really became easier for the consumer to access their own, you know, information, right? Once the MLS kind of went public on the internet and people could really start looking at homes, you know, hence, you know, why people hate Zillow, because Zillow kind of brought everything into the one portal at that one point in time. I mean, that was a huge technology play, but it took years for something to come like that. And you had all these other companies that were already kind of doing things like technology-wise that were ahead of the real estate game. But once the real estate game kind of caught on with the internet, it started exploding. But, you know, it was the agents that suffered with that because it wasn't the agents that got savvy with the technology. It was disruptor investors coming in with cash offer portals, you know, pay-per-click stuff coming in, and all these unique things on the internet that were luring people in to become, you know, online leads instead of, you know, keeping the market share with just, you know, the common kind of sphere of influence that we talk about.
I have to tell you a really funny story.
Yeah, tell me.
Did I ever tell you that my dad works for Century 21 still to this day? Works for
No,
Century 21.
if you told me, I don't remember.
That's
so,
okay.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about earlier than that, right? Like as a kid.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like going in, I remember the books that they used, and I remember going with my dad and going to another brokerage's office and picking up the keys, going to show the house that they saw in the newspaper, going back, dropping the keys off, and then my dad printing on this like huge printer And my sister and I, we loved, like, you tore off the little dots
Yeah,
off
yeah.
the side and we would make bracelets
off the
and
printer
chains.
paper. I used to do that too. That's so
And
funny.
so I think about that, and then I think about when I got in real estate in 2018, like the difference, the sheer difference in how far we've come and how much further we get to go.
Yeah.
AI
That's crazy.
and real
You got
estate.
I got a question for you. Did your dad have one of those gold jackets with Century 21?
I'm pretty sure my dad had a gold jacket. I am pretty sure.
Yeah.
And he's still, all these years later, he doesn't do anything with his license anymore.
He's still licensed,
but he
though?
still is licensed in Connecticut, and I'm pretty sure New York, though I could
That's
be
funny.
wrong on that. And so I always laugh, like, I remember when I hear people talking about, like, being left behind in the technology, and I'm like, oh, if you only really remembered where we came from.
Yeah, and if you think about that, I mean, like, the book was still around in the 90s. We're going back to, like, I'm not shading your age or age, I'm just saying, like, your story probably predates that a little bit.
Not much. Not much.
But I'm saying, like, but even in the 90s I think by 2000 they were finally all up and running online, because once the high speed thing became a thing.
Right.
But there was a just this transition period of going from a book to digital to being able to use our phones to open up the lockbox. Holy cow, what a technology feat that was for us, right? And so it's been interesting. Now I feel that the real estate's pretty caught up with whatever's going on. Like, if there's something out there that's technology, AI for example, like that, real estate's already snapping onto it. The CRMs are using it, and I feel that real estate is caught up now and tries to stay pretty relevant.
Where do you think real estate and technology are going to go? I mean, I'm asking you to look inside your magic, your crystal ball.
I think it's just, I'm always optimistic in the sense to where I feel that we'll continue to use AI and technology to help. For me, it's about getting buyers that are more further down the funnel, okay, and having more information and being ready to transact, because there's so many leads that come in, and this is a problem with not only Zillow, but just every other company out there that does lead gen. You get these people that start their search and they're prematurely connected with an agent that's not ready for 12 to 24 months, right? So then what happens with that agent is that agent just loses interest, they don't follow up, or the buyer isn't serious enough. And so I think that a lot of that technology, through automation, through robot chat, is out there right now to help move that buyer down the funnel a little bit further. So when it comes time for them to transact with an agent, their motivation is more in place. They have a better idea of what they want to do and where they want to go, and it's a more intelligent conversation. I already see that happening right now with AI, like in Follow Up Boss and YLOPO, and even Zillow using it, to where these robots. I'll tell you what Zillow does. Zillow has robots that chat with the consumer, and based on how the consumer answers the question, a part of that answer is determined whether or not they're going to even send me the connection. I mean, see, like when someone goes to Zillow's site, they don't just put the information in and I get the information sent to me instantly. Sometimes that happens, but what'll happen is, like, Zillow will ask them some screener questions, and if they don't answer those correctly, they don't always get to connect to an agent, because Zillow wants to make sure that it's not a renter, right? So to kind of weed that through, that they're planning on buying in the next 6 months. Just different factors like that to just help ensure that they're really getting, transferred to the appropriate person. And if not, Zillow's got this whole back end thing through chatting, robots, and probably their own customer service that nurtures and incubates them and works with them through the process. But that's the secret sauce, right? It's like being at I always used to say this, even when I lived in Columbia. The goal is to be at the right place at the right time, because that's all that really matters when you're transacting with these online customers. You're right. You could have someone that's transacting that's been working with an agent on and off for like the last 6-7 months, but they miss a phone call and this person goes online and says, "I want to see this home today." It's done. See, that happen all the time. We've been on both sides of that coin, So, yeah.
How do you coach your agents through that loss of they didn't follow up, or they didn't, they missed that phone call, or all of a sudden they've been working with this person, right? We know we know NAR changed. You do have to have a buyer's agency agreement signed before you walk into a house. But how are you coaching your agents through some of those missed opportunities, we call them?
I think it's just, again, part of being on a team is, just constant evaluation and consistency with us as an admin group, following up with that agent to make sure they have what they need, especially the new ones. And also, too, we do exercises with them sometimes to where it's like, okay, like I have a mass text message program that I'll say to them sometimes, hey, drop your last 100 contacts in here and send this following message. hey, this is so-and-so from the John Bolos Group. You recently inquired about a home for sale. Are you still in the market to buy or sell a home? And they'll get about a 50% response rate. And you know what, like, I would say if I gave them 100, you know how many, I'd say that 6 or 7 of them are gonna say, I already bought it, right? And so when you have the agent do that exercise, you know, at first they're like, this is going to be fun, I'm going to reconnect. We all laugh in the background of the edit because we know what's about to happen. And you see their face slowly just getting a little sadder. You know,
oh man, there's
like
another one.
There's another one. So that's a coaching moment, right?
Yeah.
And it talks about, well, let's take a look at why you lost this lead here. And you go in, it's like, well, it looks like you were really strong in the beginning, but they said they weren't going to be ready till after Christmas. And it looks like in January you tried to call them and they didn't call you back in January, and then you just gave up, and now we're following up in March and they're already under contract now. You know, so that's just an example there, but we run examples like that all the time with the team because, you know, I can only tell them so much. It's showing them and having them learn by their own example and mistakes. In fact, like, I feel that's the best way for them to learn is to see that they miss those deals. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, half of the reason I'm successful is because I failed forward a bunch of times. Yeah. You know, building teams, careers. I mean, this is my 3rd iteration of running a team. So I feel that I've got a much better sense this time around at Keller Williams on running a team versus if you look at how my team was set up the first time around and before Century 21 and then my team under Century 21, right? And then my team coming here and combining that with like the KW formula. I mean, our team has just, you know, gone leaps and bounds like how technology has for the real estate industry because of all those moments. Yeah. So it's been nice.
Let's ask like a vulnerable question.
Sure.
What was your biggest fail forward under the Covenant Properties, under Century 21, and even here under SouthPark? Or you could pick just one.
I think some of my things is I was very cocky in the beginning. Not cocky like out to the public in that sense of it, but like I didn't really care about. We'll talk about like the Keller Williams way of doing things. I didn't even like look at Gary's book or pay. I'm like, I'm already doing my own thing on number one. Why do I give a crap about what any of these other people are doing in the industry? I just didn't care, right? And I think me being closed-minded about that, there was a fail-forward moment for me that I had at some point in my early career of understanding and recognizing the different ways of being successful and taking the pieces from this and building the perfect kind of business out of it as close to it. You know, the other one is fail forward, not changing the commission splits on my team is a big one.
Oh, interesting.
Is a big one. I usually don't do that unless like Zillow puts pressure on me and they're changing their split. But I've learned through my career that if I have a team and then I say, hey, we're going to raise the rate 5% up, it's an excuse for everybody to get off the team. Not that everybody leaves, but there's always a falling out on changing commission splits when they're on the team. So I really try to keep my formula fair all the way through. If I feel that one agent deserves like a higher split than the others, I'll invent a tier structure so any agent can technically get to that level if they perform. Different things that I've learned over the past to just really make sure that I don't really have that moment. Yeah. So that's probably the agent point there. And then me here, I don't really, you know, I mean, I've had some fail forward moments here, but I don't think they've been as big as the ones we've talked about because, you know, I entered into over here and I was already 17, 18 years in. You know, I think for me, the fail forward moment would have been not joining Keller Williams a little bit sooner. How's that, right? Because I became very happy with it. And then, but I don't have any regret buying the Century 21 franchise because that really kind of like, you know, as men say, put the hair on the chest, like, you know what I mean? Like, it really showed me about what really running a brokerage was with 200 agents, multiple offices, dealing with crazy problems that were new problems from the foreclosure world. Now I'm dealing with agent getting in trouble problems as a broker in charge, you know? So, you know.
I do.
But once I got over here, I was like, I don't know why I fought it so hard, but I think it was because I didn't like the culture that they had in the offices that I was near during my early years. You know, I met the owners and I gave them a chance. I went and I looked at the office, I looked at the producing agents, and I just didn't like the vibe. It was still very old school, boys club type thing, you know, and I'm very progressive, I'm very multicultural, and it just wasn't the right fit at that time. It just wasn't that. But I wish all of that had aligned a little bit earlier because I think that I would have had less headaches through my growth career. So I guess that could be the fail forward moment for that.
That's a great fail forward though, is recognizing something like that. So now you're here, you're 22 years old.
22 years old.
22 years old.
Oh,
22 years old. I'll give you that. It does sometimes feel like that in the industry. I'm only 22 years old, right? you've created this team, you're looking to grow the team.
Yeah.
What comes next for you personally?
You mean like long term or just
Next 3 to 5 years.
next 3 to 5 years? I mean, I think for me, the next 3 to 5 years is to just, really to continue to work with my admin team so they can get the whole formula if I didn't want to be in the picture in 5 years down the road. And I don't say that like, oh, I'm getting out of the business or anything, but it's nice to know you've got a business to where if you want to step away and do other projects and do things in life, that business is under good leadership and whatnot. So that's, for me, that's where that kind of path goes. I don't think I'll ever be out of real estate. I mean, it's half of my life right now. I'm 45. Literally half of my life has been in this industry, and I've given my life to it. And I think if I gave that with a team like that and I was still in Charlotte, I'd probably be more involved on maybe even some of like the political things on the real estate side to a degree. I've thought about that a few times. I was in the MLS. I did the stuff with SCAR, South Carolina Associated Realtors, when I was in Columbia. I tried to get both parties to kind of come together at some points because there was some friction. I don't know if you know the drama behind that. But there was friction between, I'm leaving all names out. There was friction between some of the entities that were all affiliated in South Carolina. And I think that's because some of them were realtors, some of them were not realtors, so there's that whole thing, right? And so I saw a lot of that running these brokerages and getting into the MLS and and just I don't know, that stuff is interest of me and awareness, and I'm a very customer based too, so like customer awareness and helping bringing things to the customer and working with the agent. I like watching all that, I like helping people grow. So I don't know, I'm an open book, Lindsay. I know I just babbled off a lot of random stuff.
You gotta create like a new technology for agents. I'm really impressed with how technologically advanced you are. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I got it, I was one of the lucky ones that I had a computer when I was 5, so like 6 years old. So we're talking 1985, 1986, and I learned how to take it all apart, put the memory in, so I was building little computers, but like under 10 years old at that time, so it was interesting. I've always had a really technology kind of flavor to me.
What made you decide not to go into IT or computer
I've always told my wife that
or...
if I didn't succeed as a real estate agent, that I would go into the IT business. Probably what I would do. Now, for the record, everybody, I'm not like a programmer. I don't do any C++ coding. I'm just really good on the computer. You know what I mean? When it comes to navigating, going through it. Fun fact, I was the first person in Columbia, South Carolina to have an iPhone. First person. I made the news and everything. I stood in the AT&T line, and they handed me the iPhone, and they said, there was another person they were talking to, on the news channel, trying to do the interview, and I was like, that's not how you do it. So they said, you come show us. So I went on TV, and I'm demoing the whole iPhone. I never even touched the damn thing. This is my first time on the iPhone, giving a full demo, because I was watching video online with Steve Jobs on it. I'm yeah, here's how you do that. Here's how you do that. And they had me on this thing. So that's the fun fact about me. I was the first person in Columbia, South Carolina to get an iPhone.
So really into technology, John.
Yeah.
That's wild. I had no...
and I'll tell you that, the embrace with technology, and again, because I was so ahead of you had an industry that was behind on technology, and then I was so advanced with it, that the thought of bringing this is, at least in Columbia, the thought of bringing an iPad with built-in internet to pull comps live, right there, and say, let's go to the next house here. That was mind-blowing. We said it sounds so simple now.
It does.
This was so mind-blowing for people in 2009, 2010, okay, in Columbia, because, everybody, most of the people on my team are older than me, so they were trying to understand this whole thing with lead gen and technology. And I remember there was this, iPad crazy where, all of a sudden, within 4 months, 20 people on my team all went out and bought an iPad all at the same time. And then that was so who do you think was setting them all up?
You got to not only be broker owner, broker in charge, but you also get to be the IT guy.
The IT guy. So, but I will say that Keller Williams has their own IT department here.
I know.
So I don't have to do that if I don't want to.
Isn't that kind of nice? You just put it in an SOS call and you're all set and ready to go. And I know you don't use our CRM because you guys obviously use Follow Up Boss, but we've come a long way with that too, and that's been a lot of fun to test
we don't use the CRM, but we do use Command a lot though. For I love the tracking in Command and having all my docs in place there. There's a lot of things I do like about the program, and I think that if I was a single agent and I was putting my contacts in, building a sphere, and how you guys got this awesome kind of mapping kind of listing portal for CRM that I really like in that program, that trumps anything Follow Up Boss does. Follow Up Boss is just really good to handle ton of routing.
Yeah.
You know, but I think what you guys have on your platform is great for that solo agent. It's okay for teams, but really for that solo agent that doesn't want to spend the money. Everything's all built in for them right there, and it really gives them no excuse to say, well, I couldn't follow up with people because I didn't have my CRM. Like, you guys provide, you know, the foundation for the agent, from the training to even the technology portion, to where an agent can really come in with if they didn't want to join a team and really get started on their own at a very minimal cost at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always at least acknowledge that with what you guys bring to the table.
Yeah, it's actually, it's fun to watch it evolve even in the couple of years.
I remember when Command first came out, so you know,
do we need to go there? Do we need that PTSD?
When it's come to now, me and Trent had some great conversations about Command, even before I was at Keller Williams. So, but it's come a long way. It has. But it's hard though too, because you know, Keller Williams is a brokerage at the end of the day, not a software company. You know, and these software companies that do a better job, it's because they put all of their money, time, and resources only into that one thing. Right. So I think it's hard at the end of the day to be a jack of all trades if you're trying to do CRM, database management, and run a real estate brokerage, you know, when you've got other companies that only do CRM.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So here's another question that just popped into my head when you were talking about putting your money in. So you know Keller Williams partnered with Stone Point Capital?
Yes, I read that.
What do you think? I want to hear your opinion on that.
You know, I think it's, you know, I guess my first impression on it was that, like, Gary Keller needs some type of secure exit plan for himself, because he's getting to an age, right? I mean, like, I don't know how old Gary is, but I know Gary's been doing it for a long time. Yeah. And I know at one point he tried to get out of the business, you know, and he had to come back because the real estate market was so crazy. And I think bringing on a partner like that ensures that there's some liquidity to Keller Williams post Gary Keller, you know, to where he can share the vision and the mind with, and I know Keller Williams is still going to make the prominent decisions on there, but to know that they've got a backer, and it's not, I still like that they didn't go all the way in and become this IPO that went on the market with multiple shareholders. He's just got that one company, so he can share that vision with that company, and it's not based off of all these different shareholders that could buy or sell based off of a decision that they have. So I really welcome that partnership to them, and I wish all of Keller Williams best of luck with that journey, and I hope that they can put that back into really good use to further their role with technology at the end of the day. So.
I think it's ultimately I think it's lonely sometimes at the top.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's lonely, and I think this partnership brings a whole nother level of somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
Somebody to invest in us, and I think that ultimately that's going to turn into an investment in, you know, we believe in listings, leverage, and leads, and I think that that's going to ultimately pour all the way down into the three pillars that we
I wish that Keller Williams, you know, since we're talking about that, would use that type of technology to generate their own type of lead program into the system. At one point, you know, if you were to ask me before the acquisition, what should Keller Williams do? And I always thought in my head, and I mentioned to Zillow just jokingly, it would have been great for Zillow's Flex program to just partner with all of the Keller Williams agents' offices nationwide, and that would be their go-to, kind of like what Redfin did with Rocket Mortgage recently, to have that relationship to where we're going to supply this, pour these leads in, but we need agents to service these leads at the end of the day. Yeah. But you know, with the acquisition, or not acquisition, but with the partnership between Keller Williams and Stone Point. You know, I would love to see Keller Williams generate some of their leads, and then, you know, that'd be a win for the industry to win some of their business back, and not necessarily think that Zillow took it all away from them. You know, because that's the general consensus, right?
That is the general consensus. Yeah. I always looked at Zillow as that. Well, I was in software before I had children, and we did network monitoring and management. So we were always watching Zillow. Like, I was in it right when Zillow kind of was coming to the foreground, and we were watching them because they built a fantastic platform. They built such a user-friendly platform that nobody has seemed to be able to compare to. Even though everybody tries now, they've already just taken so much market share. I think that Zillow has always been a way, in a city like Charlotte, where we have so many people moving here on a daily basis, it's a way, for me at least, it was a way to grab out-of-state buyers. That's how I've always looked at Zillow. It was a partnership to help me grab those people that were making a move here.
And that's funny, because that's what I used as leverage for myself. I came from New York to South Carolina. Even though Charlotte's more of a melting pot, Columbia is not, right? So at least when you had people coming in from Zillow, it was military relocating and people from the north all coming to the south.
Yep.
So you got to work with all these different types of people. And you know, and it's funny because, again, being a new agent coming in, these people didn't care so much that you were a new agent. You know, they just cared that you were there to answer the phone and service them and really just help them, guide them through the process. And as long as you were just good on the phone and you were just, you know, had a general idea how to do real estate, I mean, you'd do okay with it. Remember, I came out of the foreclosure world and I knew how to do a transaction, but I never really worked the buyer's market. So I came in as a brand new buyer's agent with a whole new slew of different challenges and dealing with new construction and holdups and different lender, you know, setbacks. So I mean, it's definitely a learning curve, but like these I think people just really like good service at the end of the day. And a lot of these buyers coming into these online portals, not just Zillow, a lot of them, most of them are probably first-time home buyers that come in. You know, so they just really need that guidance at the end of the day. Yeah.
What's your favorite to work with still today? Listings or the listing side or the buy side?
I'm a listing agent all the way. I always have been. You know, because my asset management company, you know, with the banks, that was all listing based. So I was doing hundreds of listings per year, and then I did the buyer side with Zillow, and I really liked this. I found the buyer side a little more rewarding, like on an emotional level, because you're really helping a family move versus the seller cashing out and moving, and then you don't really have a post relationship with them because they move out of state. You know, versus the buyer, you actually build this relationship with. You know, so I had a lot of good people that I met, you know, in the mid 2010 era when I was doing the Zillow stuff. But my heart, and this is what I told, you know, Mark, you know, the franchise owner of this Keller Williams. He's like, "What are you going to do when you come over here?" And I said, "I'm going to run the listing department." And he's like, "Well, who's going to run the listings?" I'm like, "I am." And so that's what I did for my first 4 out of the 5 years here. Is I ran the listing department here for this company, and we did 100 listings. And that was before Zillow started giving us their business. We were doing about 100 listings a year, just me and Colin, my assistant. So that's always been that's a joy for me on the other side because I get a piece of my life back. I'm not out on the weekends, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, you know, I mean, doing it 22 years in now, having 2 kids, you know, like I want to have time with my family, right? And doing the listings, you know, allows you to really have more control of your time at the end of the day. And I feel that it's especially in Charlotte. Charlotte's a hard market to buy in. There's multiple offers. You know, you could be in the car with somebody for 2 weeks, you know, and then lose out on 3 offers and you're still shopping with them.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah. Give me your prediction for 2025. I've asked you a lot to like look into your crystal ball today.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sorry, but give me your predictions for 2025. You've got your fingers in a lot with real estate. You've been in the business for a long time. You're still working on the technology piece. What do you think 2025? Let's be specific, in the Charlotte market.
Okay, so I mean, I think Charlotte's always going to be on the up with a little bit of home appreciation and home value. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like how it was a few years ago when we were jumping 8% a year. But do I think that, you know, even on a slow year, we're going to have like a 2 to 4% gain in value? Probably. We'll have that gain with that. I think the transactions are going to be semi-flat, maybe a little bit more in Charlotte because it's Charlotte. But in general, I mean, transactions. I mean, I know from 23 to 24 they were flat, and 24 to 25 seems to be similar. But you know what it is. It's not that it's flat. It's you have less people doing the transactions, and a consolidation of these smaller these teams eating up more of the business is what I'm seeing. You know, it's funny because if you look at a whole, like as to how many homes were sold and how many agents were doing that business, you'll find that even if the home level stayed at a flat level, these other larger teams dominated the market and they made more money than ever. Like we had one of our best years ever last year. We were up 30% from the year before when the average real estate company was down 30%. So there's a 60% gap between us. You know, and it's just because we just took more market share. And it's not because the market was busier, because you look at the numbers like, holy cow, last year was awful. Not awful, but just like compared to other years, it just wasn't as good, you know? And I just think you're going to see more of that. And I think that as we keep seeing these numbers of 71% not doing transactions, I think that number is only going to get bigger. You know, and I think because you have technology, because you have disruption, because you have consumers that have easier access, that number's been kind of dwindling over the years. And I do feel at the end of the day, if we were to look at my crystal ball and say, not just 1 year, but maybe 5 years from now, I think there's just going to be less agents in the industry. That's what's going to happen. But those that are in the industry, that are in it, are going to be resilient, and they'll stay through it, And they'll most likely, I mean, the bulk of it is still happening. I mean, unless I'm wrong here. I mean, maybe I'm just team. I have two team brain or whatever. But I think a lot of it goes to the teams, unless it's a specialty listing, maybe commercial or a luxury property or something like that. But that bread and butter price point, a lot of it's online now. So, yeah.
I love it. Thank you for sitting with me.
No,
this
thank you.
has been
Yeah,
so
no, this
much
was fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Getting to learn so much about you. I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that Trent told you no and you started looking this way a couple years ago. Thank you for all that you do.
It's been a great experience, and Charlotte's been really good to us. I love Charlotte. I love being here, and thank you guys for having me at Keller Williams.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you.